Oh, all right, folks. So let's start. Today we'll study little bit about system calls. We'll not go into details. We'll not go into implementation of system calls in detail. You know how actually systems call are implemented inside Linux or Windows, that we'll not study. But on we will also try to see that while making a system call, what all is required. Okay, and okay, contents I have taken from okay, this book by Silvers Arts, this nice book, and of course Berkeley lecture. Less of Berkeley lecture, more of a this from this book. Okay, so we'll study the following. We'll look at the concept of kernel stack. Remember, in last class we used this word that each process has two stack, a user stack that we know, okay, and then second is kernel stack. So we'll look at little bit about it, okay, because it's a new concept. We also discussed in the last class PCB. So functionality, part of functionality of PCB is done in kernel stack, right? We'll look at that. We'll also look at API interfaces and why we need API interfaces, and process tree in Linux, right? So we'll today's lecture we'll just look at few concepts. Okay, you can read the following Anderson Dahlin's book, chapter 2.4 about kernel stack. You can read, and also this book is available to you, 3 Easy Pieces by Ramsey and Andrea. So this book is available free online, right? While this book is of course is copyrighted, it means that you'll have to buy the book. Okay, all right. Okay, just a minute. Okay. Okay, so each user process, for each user process, okay, kernel allocates two stacks. First stack we are aware of, right? This is the stack that we are aware of. Okay, the one that is in process image or process at runtime, whatever, wherever the data is stored in main memory. This we call it process image. In that there is something called user stack. And we have seen when we use process calls or function calls, and one after other we have stack frames and where local variables are stored. Okay, this we have studied in great detail in previous lectures, and also we have studied last year. If you go through the slide set, you will find it. Okay, and apart from that, okay, kernel, we have also discussed in brief that kernel also, this part of the address space of a process has, which process cannot access, right? A user process cannot access this address space. Their kernel can keep some data. Okay, and the data part where it keeps data, we call it kernel stack for processes. Okay, here since this is a process, let's assume the process P1, then this stack here belongs to process P1. However, process P1 cannot access it. Okay, so because when kernel is doing some activity for a process, it means that there's a kernel process that has started. Then that data, it needs some space to keep the data corresponding to the process. Then it uses this area called kernel stack for putting data for the process. Some intermittent results, right? That it may be using, it may be there. For example, you do file transfer, and so there is some intermittent states, and then you need some scratch pad. Okay, so all those things are kept here, like some temporary variables or local variables. Okay, all right. So why do we need kernel stack? We in last class we said that, you know, when we switch one process or we move out one process from processor, when we move out, we store the contents of registers, PC, etc. into PCB. Now we are telling that now instead of putting it in PCB, the process, the state, processor state corresponding to process, and that means all register values, etc. we can keep that in kernel stack. Okay. So it means all registers, PC, stack pointer, flex, etc. we keep that, all those things which are needed to restart the process, we keep it in kernel stack, because kernel stack corresponding to the process. Okay, so now the switching becomes very fast. Okay, all right, instead of moving into PCB. All right. So this is so now let's look at this diagram. So each process has, again repeating, two stacks, user stack and kernel stack. When user process is running, let's assume it's it started with main, then it's called procedure 1, then procedure 2, then stack will have, you know, information about procedure 1 and procedure 2, some variables, local variable, return addresses, etc., etc., right? Okay, but at this point in time, kernel stack is empty. The kernel stack corresponding to this process, say let's assume running process P1, so kernel stack corresponding to P1 is empty. Okay, now let's assume that it has moved out because of some time slice, you know, it has run for sufficient time, and then it will move from ready queue to running queue to ready queue. Okay, when it is in ready queue, what all will their user stack will be the same, but kernel state will save the state corresponding to the process or processor state of the process, right? Like CPU and register values, you know, CPU state, which is nothing but register values, PC, etc. Okay. Okay, let's assume that process done IO. Then what will happen? Just a minute. Huh? Okay. When process is, so we have, there was another state when processing is waiting for IO. It's not in ready state yet, but you know, IO process had made a syscall, and then OS has started IO. Then what will happen? Now, of course, you know, here we have some state corresponding to syscall, that process has made some syscall, okay, in user state, some variables or some parameters, etc. Okay, and while in kernel stack, what all we will have? Okay, so now you see that it's this kernel is in action for the user. Okay, kernel process started for the user, and it may be getting doing IO or whatever the user has requested. Then that process or routine or that code that's executing on behalf of user, which is a kernel code or kernel process, has to keep the local state somewhere. Okay, so all that local state, while syscall handler is in execution, will be kept in this place. And similarly, suppose it's doing IO driver is in operation, okay, like disk IO or something, then its own state will also be kept here. It's not the code, it's the state. Remember this thing, right? Now we have used top off. When we study IO, so device drivers, we'll see that device driver has two off, which is device dependent and device independent. So this is the top half, which is device independent. It's part of the kernel. Okay, any question? Okay, user kernel stack is also used. Okay, so the processor pushes data of register, etc., into kernel stack. That's it. Okay, and that kernel stack can also be used for storing the state of the syscall or the call, kernel process that is doing IO, etc. All right. Same thing we have discussed. Whatever we discuss here is mentioned here. So note that the stack does not contain the code here. When we say stack, actually it's for data. Okay. So here we will store syscall handler state or IO driver state. Okay. Okay, now let's come back to system calls. We have studied yesterday this thing that function calls are in function calls. When we one function or main, from main you call a function, actually everything is part of the same process. Okay, we don't start separate process function because at that when we compile is nothing but one code and all the code goes into text section. Okay, and for all the code, whether it's a function code corresponding function, for that, all of that, the address space remains the same. Okay. Okay, so it's a part of one single process. While when we make a system call, the user process, who makes system call is a user process. Okay. Now system call will be handled by OS. And then we'll see after some time we have a structure wherein system call corresponds to some number, and then we corresponding routine is invoked in OS to handle that system call. Or handle similarly interrupts are also handled. We'll study that later, but right now you understand that OS is a different process. Okay, it's not the same process. All right. Okay. This diagram we have discussed in detail that we have users can talk to or can utilize hardware resources. Okay, can do any IO, etc. only through, or even network packet transfer, only through system call interface. Okay, and how this system call actually inside does it, if you are interested, we can go into detail and see how these are all implemented inside. Okay. However, at this point in time, let's just focus on what these system calls are and what is the role of library on top of that. And different OSs will have different set of system calls. The Windows system calls are different from Linux system calls are different from other OSs. Okay. So, but we have a library on top because, if you suppose user program directly uses these system calls, then first thing user has to know a lot of things, because there are maybe 300-400 system calls in typical OS. The user has to know everything, right? Which is pretty messy and complex. And for doing simple operation, one has to go into a lot of details. That's the reason there is something called library on top, and then user can use these library routines. So we'll look at some examples, right? Of course, we have discussed this. System calls are of various types, and we'll get into little more detail. For process-related system call, for creating process or exiting process, waiting, terminating. Okay, a memory allocation, deallocation, a file allocation, okay, this could be related to heap. Similarly, files and folders, files related system calls like opening file, reading file, closing file, writing file, etc. And inter-process communication. Now we will study inter-process communication in detail after a few classes. Okay. All right. Okay. Now this thing we have discussed earlier as well. So the question is that now system calls are different, and you are using files, whether you use your program, C program in whether you are running it over Windows or running it over Linux, right? This same C program, it should compile and run. So does it mean that when you write a program, you have to see which OS you are using? Then it becomes very complex. Okay, and job of not only that, then if you have written a program, then it cannot be used over on different OSs. Okay, so in order to hide all these complexities of system call, what system calls are, what is underneath hardware, etc., you are provided an abstraction, and that abstraction here is provided by the library on top. Okay, for example, there is all of you would have used libc library. Okay, libc library provides the same functionality on top. Underneath, how libc library is using on Linux or libc libraries interface with Linux versus Windows would be different, because when it's implemented over or it's running over Windows, then that version of libc library will be used, which will use system calls corresponding to, say, Windows or Linux. Okay, so now there is another library called POSIX API library. So all the OSs which follow POSIX, this standard, POSIX standard, have same interface given at the top. Okay, but underneath implementation of POSIX library for different OSs could be different, but for user it doesn't matter. Once they are using POSIX libraries APIs, then that's all programmer needs. Okay, so this diagram again we are I'm repeating. So we have different processes, and then this, when you write this application, you don't worry about what interface between what system calls are being used. You simply write, for example, using libc here, and then implementation of libc over OS could be different, doesn't matter. So all right. Okay, all right. For example, even doing a very simple thing. For example, you have a copy command wherein you are copying first file into second file. Okay, take one file, open it, and then, or just copy it. And what do? You just give this command, right? But in turn, when it's implemented, it will have a very large number of system calls. For example, it's written, actually same thing is pictorially shown here. Okay, so this is a system call sequence to copy contents of one file to another. Okay, acquire file, first thing is acquire file name. Okay, in order to acquire file name, what is to be done? First thing is that OS will prompt on the screen. Okay, like in shell. Okay, it will prompt something, right? It may be something will be shown in the screen. Okay, and when the user, then second thing is it has to accept inputs. Inputs will come from keyboard, which will again require reading from keyboard, will require another system call, right? Then acquire output file names, which is similar to input file name. Acquire input file name, same thing is to be repeated. Then next system call will be that input file is to be opened. Okay, then in case the file doesn't exist, then it has to use another system call that it has to abort. Then once input file is opened, then it has to create one output file, because file doesn't exist, right? Because input file, from first file you are creating second file, so that file is to be created. Okay, if file already exists, it means that you are copying on that file, then abort. Okay, and then you get into a loop and then read from input file and write into output file. Okay, and then finally close, and this loop will go on until a condition is met, and then close out output file, and then write the completion message onto the screen, and then terminate normally. So there are 30-40 system calls are happening to do one very simple thing, which user thinks is very simple. They're copying from, just making a copy of one file to another file. All right, is it fine? Any question? So it hides all this. You, instead of doing 40 system calls, 30-40 system calls, one can just use higher level library call, which is nothing, which is CP from file 1 to file 2. Otherwise, if you are using system call by yourself, you have to write a program like this. Okay.
Yes, sir.
But that
Okay.
does not mean a user process cannot use system calls. It can use system calls. All right. Okay, this is the same thing that we have discussed earlier. In fact, this slide should have been a little earlier. So system call is nothing but explicit request to kernel made via software interrupt. Of course, see what happens is that the moment a user process does a system call or instruction corresponding system call, say read a file or something like that, then correspondingly mode changes, or we call it software interrupt sometimes. Okay, mode changes from user mode to kernel mode, and corresponding to system call, corresponding system call handler comes into the picture, which is a kernel process. Okay, all right. So all right, and then yesterday we have discussed that even malloc, calloc, free, etc., these are implemented in libc library, and which internally use some system call like brk system call. All right. So if you, this is an example, if this is a C library call like file open, and then this is mapped to, when internally this function is implemented in library call or library routine, then it uses open system call in Linux, while when it's implemented use over Windows, then it will use this system call called create file A, and so on, right? Similarly for closing, if C library has function called fclose, then it uses close function call in Linux and close handle in Windows, Win32, okay, and so on. Okay, all right, like a very simple thing like scanf and printf, internally it will use some system call in Linux and some system call in Windows. Okay, this diagram pictorially shows the same thing, right? That we are using, say example, printf function. Okay, so printf function actually is doing what? We are printing it onto screen. This word greetings. Okay, and then it means that data has to go to screen. Now these hardware resources are not accessible to user process, right? So it will make a system call. So now this printf is part of standard library, is implemented as standard library. Okay, standard C library, which in turn will make a system call called write. Okay, and OS will do the job. All right, and then it comes back. Once the system call is complete, then control may come back to the same process. Okay, this is another example. Okay, for example, standard read API. Okay, now this is API corresponding to some library function, where what we are doing here, we are reading, okay, from file, this file fd, okay, and then reading into a buffer. So it's shown as string here. Okay, basically into a buffer, which is nothing but a string. And then how much we are doing, how many bytes we are copying is given by this variable count or this parameter count. Okay, and size t, of course, is a kind of type. Okay. Okay. Similarly, as size t is a type, return type. All right. All right. So this is a basic, very simple library call that we can use. Okay. So another example is that Python, for example, we have open file. Then the Python is written in C. Okay. And then this, when it's compiled, actually you are making a call. It changes after compilation into a function call that's used in C or C++. This is called fopen. Okay. Now, if you are running it over say Windows, then this fopen will be transformed into create file A. Otherwise, it will be transformed into syscall open in case of Linux. Okay. So this is very simple process, right? Now, however, this is very simple thing that we have mentioned here. But in fact, this higher level library calls, as we see in case of copy from file 1 to file 2, may in turn contain very large program, which may consist of a large number of function calls. Okay. How do we implement it? I mean, we are not talking about very, how actually, what are the basically instructions required to implement file transfer, for example. We are not going into details, or how device drivers are driven into and all that, right? We are not looking into that, but in general, the basic things, what is going to happen. Okay, so when system call is made, then immediately there is a system call corresponds to some number. Okay, and then using that number, okay, a table is indexed. Okay, so actually there is a common table. When we study interrupt, we'll say that there is a common table. Index of that is, so this is index, say I is equal to 1 to whatever, and 0 to n, right? So we use this index, whether it's a system call, so corresponding to that you'll have an index. Index will point to an entry here, and then that entry will be a pointer to syscall routine for that syscall. See, there are 300 plus syscalls. For each one of those, there will be a pointer, and it means that now control goes to that code, and that process is started, and then that process does the job what it's supposed to do. Okay, so if you read it again, it's a system call interface maintains a table index according to these numbers, and each syscall has a number, like each interrupt has a number. Similarly, each syscall has a number. So this syscall interface invokes intended function call in OS kernel. Of course, you know, this thing that we have seen, syscall function, is part of OS. And then it returns the status of function call and return value. So when it has done the job, it returns the value back to user process. Okay. So then the rest of things is the same that we have discussed, that user need not know details of all this, but just use API. So when again, when a user process makes a system call, okay, of course system call handler will come into play, that we have seen here. Okay. And then all the parameters of user process will be saved into stack, kernel stack. Okay, save contents of resistant kernel stack. And okay, and then of course, you know, first thing is that save all the values of the user process or register values, etc., into stack, kernel stack, and then give control to syscall handler, or that function that handles the corresponding system call. And when we exit from handler, it means that handler has done the job. Then all the registers that were saved into kernel stack are moved back into the processor, or processor register values are reset based on the values that we have saved earlier, so that process can restart from there. Okay, any question?
Sir, could you please tell again what syscall handler does?
See, suppose you want to read certain bytes from file. Okay, then of course, you know, there can't be a common routine for reading from keyboard or writing over terminal and reading from hard disk. You know, so there are different kind of syscall. So there is a syscall corresponding to reading from, say, hard disk or file, reading a file which may be on hard disk or whatever. And then syscall will get the whatever is requested for. There is a certain number of bytes from file are requested, then it will be passed back to the user process. So syscall does the function, whatever intended function is, whether reading from terminal or keyboard, so reading from keyboard or writing into terminal or doing IO or creating a file or whatever. But it has to return back something, right? It has to return back some status information or something, or bytes that are asked for back to user process. So all that it will do. Okay, so there are, you know, I will just so there are, let's assume, 100 different types of system calls, 300, let's assume 300 different syscalls. Now each syscall is corresponding to different thing. Okay, some is for reading file, opening file, closing file, etc., etc. So now the user process is making a syscall. Say, let's say open file. Okay, and it will have some parameters. So corresponding to this syscall, you know, each syscall will have a number. Okay, and this number, let's say this is the first number 1. Okay, so in this table, we'll look at the entry corresponding to index 1, and then this will give the address of the syscall routine that will handle the request for opening a file, or is a pointer to that OS routine. Okay, now as soon as syscall is made, then OS will look at what syscall has been made. Okay, and then move the control back to move the control to that syscall. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, similarly, interrupts. There can be interrupts of various types, and then each interrupt is numbered, and then that number can index to this table. actually it's called interrupt vector table, and this table which also handles system call. Of course it's implementation dependent, but usually in most OS is a one table, and then this interrupt, each interrupt has to be handled by OS, and then again is we call it here interrupt handler. So this entry here points to an interrupt handler for that kind of interrupt. And system, of course, user process move to kernel process, and all registers are same. So method is same whether it's an interrupt or syscall, okay, or trap. Trap is something when, for example, a divide by 0 or some, as part of user process, your instruction is doing something which is not supposed to do, some exceptional condition was raised, and then immediately system process switches to kernel mode. Okay, in order to switch to kernel mode, it has to save all the register into kernel stack or PCB in older systems. Okay, and then control moves to that handler routine, whether it's interrupt handler or syscall handler. It does own job, and then when process has to be reached, then process of course come to ready state as we studied earlier, and then if the process picked up by scheduler, then all this process state that is in kernel stack are restored or kind of put back into different registers such that process can start from there. Is it fine, or so who pushes these registers into kernel stack? Well, I mean, this again implementation dependent, right? Immediately there are some processors, actually little intelligence is there in processor to immediately push it into register into kernel stack, and then give control to interrupt handler routine or syscall handler routine. All right, okay. Any other question? Think through and just visualize, try to visualize, and then we can, if required, we can get into details. Okay, all right. This is an example I have taken from Linux book by Bovet and Cassati. So basically, same concept is shown here, right? In user mode, a user may use some function, right? Or like something. Even for example, shell like CP one file to another file, or file reading or something, or read file or etc., right, which can be part of user program. And then it's what happens that there is a wrapper routine, even very basic system call we put inside a wrapper which is part of library, okay, or some implementation around it, okay, as we have seen in case of copy. Or there can be just basic wrapper is put on top of basic syscall, and then it goes to kernel mode, and then this syscall in turn syscall handler will handle this syscall and then goes into particular routine, service routine. So this is the sequence usually, and then return also is the same way, right? So you are making a user process is using a syscall, okay, sorry, library function call, and then library function call in turn is making syscall, okay. That syscall corresponding to syscall, a handler is invoked, and that handler will give control to a function that will do the job corresponding to syscall, like reading a file or reading keyboard or writing on terminal or file copy or whatever. Okay, is it fine? I think we have enough examples now. Okay, now what are different types of syscalls? Syscalls are process control, file management, device management, information management, communication, and production. Okay, all right, very good. So here is, and you can actually now, you know what is syscall. You can do little googling and then find out what are syscalls for Windows 11, for example. Windows 11 is a recent one, released just few weeks back. As an exercise, please find out the details of Windows 11 and try to relate to what we are learning now. Okay, all right. You first thing, you find out how many system calls are there. Similarly, you know, if you really want to learn more about OS, then look at recent release of Linux and see how many system calls are there. It should be something, you know, last release had about 350, 360, something around that system calls, and might have gone up now. Okay, so some system calls that we see, we have already looked at, like some of these. So for example, to create a process, in Windows we have create process, while in Unix we have, or Unix or Linux also is same, fork. Exit the process, and then there is a exit syscall. Similarly, wait, there is a wait syscall in Linux, while wait for signal object in Windows. Create a file syscall is create file in Windows, and open in Unix, and so on. Okay, so you can see that large number of syscalls, and this slide gives you, you know, what syscalls are for creating process, and abort, load, execute, wait, getting, you know, even timing timer signal, sorry, time signals or time value. All these things require syscalls. In fact, we will study in detail about lock mechanism. How can we create a lock in such that a part of the code can be executed by one process at a time? We call it mutual exclusion. In order to achieve mutual exclusion, one method is the lock. Now, lock is, of course, whatever be the API, internally it uses a syscall, because, you know, in order to even create a lock, there is some hardware mechanisms are needed, like disabling interrupts during the time when the lock is active, something like that. Okay, we'll study that in detail. And then, of course, file management and device management syscalls, right? Okay. Then information maintenance later, get time or date, set time or date, get system data, you know, set system data, like even when you want to read, you know, you want to know how many processes are running at a time, right? You can easily find out what are the processes running in a system, right? And then that information comes to syscall. Okay, all right. Like suppose in the directory system you say ls, then you get details of files. And similarly, when you do even change directory, etc., then directory structure is inside, right? It's not, shell just gives you commands to do that, right? So all this corresponds to a system call. Okay, and then we'll study this in detail about message passing models and shared memory models, and all these APIs that are given on top require some kind of system call inside. Okay, similarly for protection, we need system calls. Okay, and if you want to see the system calls for Linux kernel 3.7, which has 393 system calls, go to this link, and you can always find out what are system calls. This I have mentioned just first page of that. Okay, all right. Okay, now let's look at process creation in any system, right? So when OS starts, it's just one process, right? First process, and from then processes are created. Say for example, we have init process in Linux, and then some other system is called system end. system D process. Okay, and so this is in Linux. We have first process created, which is called, of course, I mean it's called system D in Linux and init in Unix. And it has process ID of 1, and from that we can fork number of processes, right? Like we can fork from this shell process. What is a forking mechanism? Creation of new process from one process is forking. Okay, so that we'll study in the next class. Similarly, Python process is forked and the login int process forked. From this another process for the login D process forks bash process, and which in turn forks two processes like PS and VIM and so on. So at any point in time, you can see a large number of processes running, which started from basically one process. Now you may immediate question will come that, you know, code for this process is different from code from, for example, this process. So it means there must be some mechanism that once new process created should take the some different code. Otherwise, there's no point duplicating the main process into multiple processes. Okay, so we'll study that also, that how new processes are created which do different functionality.